Good morning, viewers and listeners of Concerned Citizens Media. Thank you for coming back. I always appreciate you sharing your time with me. Uh, I have several news updates for today, April the 4th, 2023. So I will start with a resolution passed by the Amhara Madamar generation. So I will start with that one and credit for ETO 360. So these past days, the Madamar generation of Ethiopia severely divided into two groups. Those who are supporting him, supporting the Madamar generation of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed in Oromia, and those who are opposing him, his policy, his leadership in Amhara region. So these two regions are in a very serious conflict, visibly on the policy of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed of Ethiopia. Uh, this is very serious division, and the Damar generation is divided over his policy. So it's not like he claimed that the Damar generation is a new vision for Ethiopia. Now the Amharas are against it, against his policy, against his leadership. But in the contrary, the Oromos are who, uh, whether they are forced to do so, we don't know. I don't have any evidence. But usually the government cohorts use different tactics to force the people to come out and support the government. So it happened massively in different Oromia cities, towns, and celebrated Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed achievement in the last 5 years. While in Amhara, the opposite. They want him to resign. They want him, to be accounted for what happened in the last 5 years against Amhara, as they claim, and demonstrated in different cities. You know, uh, express their grievances against the prime minister and his leadership. And this group, the one I'm going to show you, the protesters, they have about 9-point resolution. So I will start with that one, then continue with other news. So it's a complete division in the Maddavan generation. Let's listen what they say, and I have a rough translation in English.
ሰልፉ ስለምን አስፈለገ የሚለውን ነገር በተመለከተ ባጭሩ ያሏት ነገር ነበር። መልእክት አለች፣ አስተላልፏት መልእክት። እሷን መልእክት ይርነቃቸው እሷን ብታሰማልኝና ወደ ሀብታሙ ብመለስ ጥሩ መልእክትም ስለሆነ ሰልፍ የወጣው ሳይሆን ብሶት የወለዳቸውን አንገብጋቢ ጥያቄዎች ለማህበረሰቡ ለማሳወቅ ብሎም መንግስትን ለማስጠንቀቅ እንጂ መንግስትን ለመማፀን እንዳልሆነ እያስገነዘብ የሰልፉን ዋና ዓላማና የአቋም መግለጫ እንደሚከተለው እናስደምጣለን። አንደኛ፣ የፖለቲከኛ እስረኞች የሆኑት አርበኛ ዘመነ ካሴ የአማራ ህዝባዊ ኃይልና እንዲሁም ፋኖች እንዲፈቱ እንጠይቃለን። ሁለተኛ፣ የአማራ ፋኖንና የአማራ ልዩ ኃይልን ትጥቅ ለማስፈታት ብሎም የአማራን አንገት ለማስደፋት የአማራ ነባር ርስቶቻችን ተከብረው ወደ አማራ በአስቸኳይ እንዲካለሉ በጀት እንዲለቀቅላቸው ወራሪዎች ለቀው እንዲወጡ እንጠይቃለን። በፌደራልና በክልል ደረጃ የሚደረግ አማራን የማሳደድ በጅምላ የመጨፍጨፍ አጸያፊ ተግባር በአስቸኳይ እንዲቆም እናሳስባለን። ስድስተኛ መንግስታዊ የሃይማኖት ጣልቃ ገብነት በአስቸኳይ እንዲቆምና የምዕመናኑን ደህንነት እንዲጠብቅ ያፈረሳቸውን የእምነት ተቋማት ቦታ በአስቸኳይ ገንብቶ አስከብሮን እንዲያስረክብ እንጠይቃለን። ሰባተኛ ነባሮች የእስልምናና የኦርቶዶክስ ክርስትና እምነት በመበጣጠስ በሃይማኖት ሽፋን ሀገር ለማፍረስ የተነሳን ህገወጥ ማፊያ ቡድን በህግ እንዲጠየቅልን እንጠይቃለን። ስምንተኛ በሰሜኑ ጦርነት ሰለባ በሆነው ችግር ውስጥ የወደቁ ውድ ኢትዮጵያን መንግስት አስፈላጊውን ሁሉ ድጋፍ እንዲያደርግና ወደ ቀያቸው መልሶ እንዲያቋቁማቸው እንጠይቃለን። ዘጠነኛ የብሔር ጥቃትና ዘር ማጥፋት ሰለባ ሁነው ከኦሮሚያ ከቤኒሻንጉል ጉሙዝ ሌሎችም የኢትዮጵያ ክፍሎች የተፈናቀሉ
ዋና ዋና የሚሏቸው ማለት
The indictment of Donald.
Okay, I'll come back to the indictment of former President Donald Trump coming up, I think, today in New York. So that's a serious warning and a serious warning for the Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed to fulfill the demands. They have about 9. Let me read it quickly. So this is a demand. This is not begging the Prosperity Party or Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed to do. They are asking, they are demanding this for this resolution to be carried out immediately. One, they call for their political prisoner and their hero, Zamane Kase, and others, Amara public forces and Fano militia to be released immediately. Second, they say they oppose dismantling and disarming Amara Special Forces, Fano militia, and they warn the government against trashing or belittling Amara. 3. Ethnic-based dismantling and dismantling of homes and the displacement in Addis Ababa must stop. The victims must be compensated, and those responsible for this illegal conduct must be brought to justice immediately. 4. Amara's historical places must be given back to Amara, and the budget must be released to administer them. They are talking about the controversial areas like Walqait Tagade and Humara, taken by force from Tigray, still occupied by Amara forces. So they are talking about that. And this remains to be seen if the Abiy Ahmed can carry out. 5. Targeting of Amharas and mass killing. Mass killing must stop immediately. 6. Government interference in the church or government-sponsored attack against churches must stop. The restoration of churches must be done, and the safety and the well-being of priests and the churches must be protected. 7, they say, we demand justice and accountability for groups or illegal mafia actors who are working in dismantling the historical ties and friendly coexistence between Islam and Christianity. 8, they say they demand the government to rehabilitate all the victims of the war happened in northern part of Ethiopia. And 9, ethnic-based attacks against Amharas in Oromia, Benishangul, Gumuz region, and others must stop immediately. So these are a very strong demand or resolution by anti-Madamar vision, anti-Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed of Ethiopia. It's a massive protest. It's a massive protest, and demanding from his removal from the power and calling for his accountability. But this group, they didn't include this one. But in the other videos I watched, they demanded for his immediate removal and accountability, and calling for other politicians who can take the power and create stability in Ethiopia. So these are about 9 demands or resolution, and we'll see if the Prime Minister or Prosperity Party can carry out these demands. But I don't think the Prime Minister cares about even pay attention. He pay attention, but I don't think he carry these demands. But that's a resolution. But what you can see is Ethiopia is divided, strongly divided between two groups for now. Anti-Madamar generation and pro-Madamar generation in Oromia. And Sidama also came out today, I think, in support of the Madamar generation. So that's a serious situation we are facing, and we'll see. Let's continue with others, and let me read this one. This standard. I have a couple of from Addis Standard, a couple from BBC. This one says, as violence in Fantale, another Karayyu Gada leader died after heavily beaten by government security forces. So this has happened again. It happened last time. The government forces conducted extrajudicial killing of about 14 or 16 Karayyu Gada leaders, and nobody accounted for. That's why we see repeated crimes in Ethiopia. Nobody accounted for. 16 killed, mass shooting, just collected and killed by security forces under the leadership of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. Now is another one. Residents say Gobu Hawile, a successor of the Karayyu Gada leader who died during the 2021 massacre of the Karayyu Gada leaders, died of injuries incurred when he was heavily beaten by government security forces over the last weekend. The government forces had heavily beaten Gobu Hawile and other people who were with him in Tuti village in Fantale district of East Shoa zone at a specific place known as Kara, a place where members of Karayyu Gada leaders were massacred in 2021, a resident told Addis Standard. In the same place, they killed another Abba Gada. The resident, who asked to remain anonymous for safety reasons, said Gobu Hawile then died of his injuries on Monday. He added, the son of Hawas Mato Bora, a senior Karayyu Gada leader who was gunned down 2 weeks ago by militants from the neighboring Amhara region, is among the victims of the beatings, and he is currently lingering between life and death in nearby hospital. According to the Voice of America, another local elder, Boru Jile, who survived the beating, is also in critical conditions and receiving treatment in Wolanchitti Hospital. On 21st March, Addis Standard reported that Hawas Mato Bora, the last remaining senior leader of the Karayyu Michele Gada, who survived the massacre of 14 Gada leaders in December 2021, was shot by Amhara militants on 12 March and died of his injuries 2 days later. They say the Amharas are conducting illegal acts themselves, and they are calling for, you see their resolution. They must stop their illegal conduct first. Speaking to Addis Standard, during then Roba Bulga Jilo, a Karayyu native and indigenous people's rights advocate based in the US, expressed his concern that, coupled with the ongoing drought and the lack of incoming aid, the persistent insecurity in the area may result in disastrous consequences for the Karayyu community and threaten their existence. Addis Standard repeated attempt to get comment from Boru Jilo, administrator of the Fantale district, and other local and Oromia region government officials on the persistent violence in Fantale district were unsuccessful. Always nobody is there to account for. And that's why we see crimes repeated again and again under Abiy Ahmed leadership. This one, Health Minister requests WHO 1.2 million cholera vaccines to contain raging outbreak in southern Ethiopia. Ethiopian Ministry of Health has requested 1.2 million cholera vaccines from the World Health Organization, WHO, to be able to control the ongoing cholera outbreak in Oromia and Somali regions in southern Ethiopia. Since the most recent outbreak of cholera was reported in Harenbuluk Warada, Bale zone of Oromia region last year in August, it has spread to a total of 22 waradas, with 18 of them being in 4 zones of Oromia, namely Bale, Guji, West Arsi, and East Bale, as well as 4 in Liban zone of Somali. The outbreak is currently raging in 18 districts, despite the fact that it has been contained in 3 warada of Oromia and 2 in Somali, according to a statement by the ministry. The ministry further said 26 temporary cholera treatment facilities have been set up in all of Woredas where the outbreak has occurred. Appropriate services are being provided by supplying the centers with medical supplies. Cholera vaccinations has been made available and administered to at-risk populations in Somalia and Oromia, the statement added, noting that is following up on the request of 1.2 million additional cholera vaccines. The ministry has indicated that various efforts are being taken to prevent and control the epidemic, including ongoing distribution of cholera-related materials for personal and environmental hygiene, timely distribution of medical resources, delivery of health education and professional development opportunities, immediate access to medical care, and strengthening disease screening and examination. Last week, the further spread of cholera outbreak to East Bale, Guji, and Borena zone of Oromia and Dawa zone of Somali regions has increased the death toll so far to 50 people, and the total cholera cases registered as of 23rd March to 2,276, the latest UN report said. According to the report, the total cholera caseload has doubled since the end of January 2023, and close to 3.3 million people are now at high risk in those affected areas. Recently, Medical Experts Association in Oromia had been urging on the seriousness of the cholera outbreak, underlining that unless the government and all involved parties do not take immediate action, the situation will continue to worsen and lead to disastrous consequences. That is again from Addis Standard. So that's in addition of the political instability, the the inflation, and we have this disease and drought, hunger, so many problems under Abiy Ahmed, so many. This is this too from BBC. UN extremely worried about Rwanda asylum. The UN Human Rights Office says it is still extremely worried about the impact of the UK's government plans to send some migrants to Rwanda if they arrive in the United Kingdom through illegal routes. UK Home Secretary Suella Braverman has insisted Rwanda is a safe country for immigrants. She said on Sunday that she believed the Rwanda policy would have a significant deterrent effect so that people would stop making the journey across the channels to UK. But the UN Human Rights Office said assessment done by the UN Refugee Agency showed that the asylum system in Rwanda was not robust enough. There are also concerns about respect for the right to freedom of assembly and freedom of expression in Rwanda. Those concerns do remain today, spokesperson Ravina Shamsuddin told the BBC's Newsday program. We have a lot of evidence of how these plans offshore asylum facilities go wrong, she added. So the UK is, instead of handling the immigrants on its own soil, they just diverted or deported them to Rwanda and paid Rwanda money to handle the immigrants. So That is UK's decision. This one, Rwanda's ruling party elects women to deputize Kagame. Rwanda's ruling party, the Rwanda Patriotic Front, RPF, in Kotanyi on Sunday elected its first woman vice chairperson as President Paul Kagame retained the chairmanship position. Console Uwimana was elected by 1,945 votes, about 93% of the votes cast. Observers say promoting her is the party's way of giving more power to women and keeping the ethnicity quota balanced in its top leadership. Mrs. Uwimana is a veteran banker and a businesswoman who served as a senator until 2019. Rwanda's next general election is scheduled for 2024. President Kagame has been president of the East African nation since 2000, almost for 23 years. A controversial referendum in 2015 removed a two-term constitutional limit for president. So he removed the limit to stay as a president for life, maybe. So he is already in power for 23 years. Could be beating Uganda's president, Yoweri Museveni, who is in power for more than 36 years. On Sunday, Mr. Kagame got 99.8% of the total votes to retain leadership of the ruling party. Rwanda has one of the world's highest proportions of women in parliament and in government. So that's, active participation of women in politics. It's okay. We don't appreciate discrimination. That's good, but just staying in power for unlimited time, I think is a sign of dictatorship. So Kagame should consider giving chance for another leaders. So that's all I have. Let's continue with the trouble with former President Donald Trump. He got so many legal challenges. He's running for president in 2024. But before that, he got so many challenges. January 6th hearing, election, fraud claims, now the hash money payment, so many. It's business dealings. So we'll see what will gonna be the investigation and the indictment will lead. Will they force him to, to resign from running for president? We don't know.
Trump is historic, unprecedented, and just the tip of a legal iceberg. The New York charges, reportedly 30 of them, are expected to be detailed on Tuesday, focused on a $130,000 hush money payment to a porn star during the 2016 presidential campaign.
We do know it centers around, a legal, very common confidentiality agreement that was signed years and years ago with Stormy Daniels and between her attorneys and Michael Cohen.
But the New York case is likely not the most dangerous for the former president.
Compared to the other investigations, which include efforts to overthrow or overturn the 2020 election, the New York case seems to be the least serious of them all.
In Georgia, a grand jury has recommended indictments for multiple people over interference in Georgia's 2020 election. It's not clear Trump is among them, but legal experts say this conversation between Trump and Georgia's Secretary of State amounts to a smoking gun.
I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have.
The jury forewoman offered this murky but tantalizing tidbit.
There are certainly names that you would recognize, yes.
Another legal threat? Special counsel Jack Smith's probe of Trump's handling of classified documents. Last summer, the FBI seized more than 100 of them from Trump's Florida home after he refused requests to turn them over. Smith is also investigating Trump's actions during the January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol. Trump has dismissed all the investigations as partisan witch hunts, but until the New York indictment, the man known as Teflon Don has faced real repercussions only at the ballot box. A Northwestern University psychologist says Trump's risk-taking, even amoral qualities, are key to his popularity.
Here's this beast out there doing it for me, going out there fighting for me, saying what I feel deep down, and that's attractive. I mean, like, you know, he may be a narcissist, he may be a sociopath, but he's my narcissist, my sociopath.
Whether that approach works in court might well be tested again and again. John Hendren, Al Jazeera, New York.
Okay, this is
we have met and listened to
this for
a diverse
Kenya.
group of Kenyans, including religious leaders from all faiths, about the crisis facing our country today. They have implored us to give dialogue, especially during these holy periods of Easter and Ramadan. It is in this context that we make this counter offer to Hon Ruto's call for dialogue. Mr. Ruto has asked me and Azimio to enter into a constitutional, open-ended, and binding dialogue with his government to find a resolution to the issues that we in Azimio have raised about the last year's election and the key governance and the cost of living issues facing our country.
So that's good news for Kenyans for now.
At Dots, an ordinary pretzel just isn't enough.
No
So they add
focus
savory seasoning and
until
tempting buttery flavor to every delicious
continue.
twist. Now that's enough to make you order a
Walking down a path where enslaved Africans once marched in chains, headed to America, is the United States' first black Vice President, Kamala Harris, on a visit to what was a major hub for the Atlantic slave trade in Ghana. The tour guide explains many of the captives didn't see a way out and believed only death would bring them freedom.
I, too, believe that we must remember history. It should teach us not only about our past, but about our destiny and our future. That we must learn from it in a way that we make the ancestors proud.
More than just a charm offensive, Harris is on a week-long three-nation tour of Africa, an attempt to counter the growing influence of China and Russia on the continent. Russia has signed new military cooperation agreements with 17 African countries. China is the continent's largest trading partner, with $2 trillion in investments and construction projects. After the U.S.-Africa summit last December, Harris is one of several senior White House officials to visit the continent in recent months, marking a contrast with the previous Trump administration.
The United States is trying to catch up to Russia and China. This is the most recent iteration of a supposed policy with regard to Africa, but the U.S. has not demonstrated that in terms of investment, in terms of sustained engagement with various African governments.
After Ghana, Harris traveled to Tanzania to meet the nation's first female president. She then went on to Zambia, promising more American investment. But with 21 African countries on the verge of bankruptcy, their leaders say they want debt relief first.
What is keeping us down for now, Vice President, is the debt overhang. We carry a debt burden that really is making it difficult for us to continue with our restructuring process of the economy.
Kamala Harris announced more than $7 billion in private sector and U.S. government commitments during her trip. It is an attempt to renew relations. From this shared history, Harris says, the United States would build a common future alongside Africans.
Okay, one more video.
It's been more than a half century since astronauts journeyed to the moon. Well, folks, that's about to change.
Standing in Houston, Texas, before the current astronaut corps and veterans of the Apollo and Space Shuttle programs, NASA Administrator Bill Nelson introduced the four-member crew of Artemis II: Christina Cook, Victor Glover, Reed Wiseman, and Canadian Jeremy Hansen.
This is humanity's crew.
Reed Wiseman is mission commander for Artemis II, while Christina Cook and Jeremy Hansen will serve as mission specialists. Cook is set to make history as the first woman on a lunar mission, and Hansen as the first international astronaut to take such a journey, something NASA Administrator Nelson emphasized during the announcement.
We choose to go back to the moon and then on to Mars, and we're going to do it together. Because in the 21st century, NASA explores the cosmos with international partners.
Victor Glover, a U.S. naval aviator, will pilot the Orion spacecraft on the 10-day round-trip mission around the moon, testing the functions of the systems and equipment that future crews will use to eventually return to the lunar surface. In an interview with VOA before last year's Artemis I mission, Glover said he embraces the historic opportunity to be the first person of color assigned to a moon mission.
People keep asking me, is it meaningful to you that little black kids look up to you and say they want to be like you? You know what? Let's be honest. I represent America. I'm a naval officer, and I work for NASA. I represent America. And little white kids, little Mexican kids, little Hispanic kids, little Iranian kids follow what we're doing, because this is maybe one of the most recognizable symbols in the universe.
Not only is the makeup historic, the crew of Artemis II could also venture farther in space than any humans before them, traveling over 1 million total kilometers in a path that extends well beyond the moon before returning back to Earth. NASA says the exact distance and plan depends on a number of factors, including the date of the actual mission launch. At the end of the NASA ceremony introducing his crew, Reed Wiseman expressed the determination of the agency to further its goals in space despite repeated delays and cost overruns.
3 words that we keep saying in this Artemis program: we are going, and I want everybody to say it on 3. 1, 2, 3. We are going!
NASA hopes to launch Artemis II as early as November 2024, with the first mission to the lunar surface as early as 2025. Kane Fairbaugh, VOA News, Chicago.
Okay, as the last one for today's update. So let me conclude today's presentation. I'm watching the division of the Madamar generation very seriously in Ethiopia, especially the complaint, the demands, the resolution, and the continued serious talk of, especially by the Amharas and those who are supporting Amharas, whether in a diaspora community. They are very highly organized. The engagement is very serious, and back home through demonstrations, through social media, they are fighting against Madamar vision, against the Prime Minister, despite the Prime Minister's effort, despite his visit in the region. He was in the region. I think maybe he's still in the region. I don't know. But he was in the region visiting historical places and historical churches, and talking about investing money, providing money for to renew those historical places, talking nice about those former rulers, and visiting palaces like Fasilides. So despite all his efforts, the Amhara region, especially the young generation, are against his policy, against him. And we don't know what will be the end of this opposition. So the Amharas returned back, fought back. The Oromos, those who are supporting the Madamar generation, those who are supporting Prosperity Party, the Prime Minister's policy. They came out in a large number, decorated with different, clothing, posters, and treating him as a king. It seems as, a revenge against the Amhara Fanus, Amhara anti-government protesters. So there is very tough engagement on the social media, very tough engagement in the protest between these two largest group in Ethiopia. So we'll watch it and report to you what will be the end of this infighting on Maddamer generation. So that's all I have for today. I will be back with other news update. Thank you for joining me. Be safe. So long, everyone.